12 species had gathered in the diplomatic hall, but only one voice filled the room. Ambassador Dren of the Kravith Dominion stood 8 feet tall. His body was covered in natural armor that looked like black volcanic glass. Her muscular arms crossed over his chest as he spoke, and his red eyes swept across the gathered delegates with open contempt. "You speak of dangerous worlds," Dren said, his voice rumbling like distant thunder. "You speak of predators and survival. But none of you understand what it means to be truly apex." The other aliens in the room stayed quiet. Most of them were small, peaceful species. The Vichy were bird-like creatures who stood barely 3 feet tall. The Mallory looked like oversized pill bugs with too many legs. The Florians resembled walking plants with gentle dispositions. None of them wanted to anger the Kravith. "My people evolved on Kravos Prime," Dren continued, walking slowly across the polished floor. "A world of active volcanoes, acid rain, and predators that would give your entire species nightmares for generations. The molten serpents could swim through lava and strike from beneath the ground. The stone crushers weighed 40 tons and could bite through our armor. The shadow stalkers hunted in complete darkness and killed without sound." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We hunted them all to extinction. Every single one. Because the Kravith fear nothing. We are the apex predators of a galaxy. We are death incarnate." The delegates nodded quickly, eager to show agreement. No one wanted to be the target of Kravith aggression. In the corner of the room, a human woman sat quietly. Dr. Annie Webb was in her mid-40s with gray streaks in her brown hair. She wore a simple diplomatic uniform and held a data pad loosely in her hands. Unlike the others, she did not look impressed or frightened. She looked amused. Counselor Prim, the small Vichy who moderated these meetings, noticed her expression. The bird-like alien tilted her head and asked, "Dr. Webb, does humanity wish to add anything about dangerous predators?" Annie looked up with a slight smile. "Oh, we brought one of our companions aboard the station. Nothing special." Dren turned his massive head toward her. "Companion? You mean a pet? Some kind of livestock?" "Not exactly," Annie said. "We call them cats." "Cats," Dren repeated, as if testing a word in a foreign language. "And what is this cat? Some kind of beast of burden? A food animal?" "They are small," Annie said. "Furry. They live in our homes with us." Dren laughed. It was a harsh sound like rocks grinding together. "The mighty humans keep small, furry creatures as companions. How precious. And where is this creature now?" Annie checked her data pad casually. "Oh, Mr. Whiskers is exploring the station. He does not like to stay in one place for too long." "Mr. Whiskers," Dren said, and several Kravith guards behind him laughed as well. "You let your pet wander freely? Is it not a security risk?" "Mr. Whiskers can take care of himself," Annie said simply. "I am sure he can," Dren said with heavy sarcasm. "I would very much like to meet this fearsome companion of yours, Dr. Webb. Perhaps it will show me what humans consider dangerous." "Perhaps it will," Annie agreed, and something in her smile made Counselor Prim shift uncomfortably on her perch. The meeting continued, but Dren had lost interest in diplomacy. He spent the next hour boasting about Kravith conquests, listing the worlds they had claimed and the enemies they had crushed. By the time the session ended, every delegate was exhausted except Dren himself as the aliens filed out of the chamber. Supervisor Grell approached Counselor Prim. The 6-legged Mallory was the station's security chief, and his antennae twitched with concern. "I have received strange reports," Grell said quietly. "Several crew members claim they saw something moving through the lower corridors. Something small and fast." Prim glanced at Annie, who was walking calmly toward the exit. "I believe that would be the human's companion. Should we be concerned?" Before Prim could answer, Dren's booming voice interrupted them. "Concerned? About a small, furry pet?" He laughed again. "You prey species worry about everything. Perhaps that is why you never evolved beyond fear." He walked past them without another word, his guards following close behind. That night, Dren slept in his private quarters. The room was dark, just as he preferred. His species had excellent infrared vision and needed no lights to navigate. He was deep in sleep when something woke him. Dren's eyes opened instantly. His warrior training meant he was fully alert within seconds. Something was wrong. Something was different, that he was being watched. Dren scanned the room with his infrared vision. The walls glowed with residual heat. The furniture was cool. Everything seemed normal. Then he looked at the foot of his sleeping platform. Two small eyes glowed in the darkness. They were fixed on him with an intensity that made his four hands curl into fists. The eyes did not blink. They did not waver. They simply watched. Dren lunged forward. The eyes vanished. He searched his entire quarters, pulling apart furniture, checking every corner. He found nothing. No trace. No evidence that anything had been there at all. For the first time in his life, Ambassador Dren of the Kravat Dominion did not go back to sleep. Something was wrong on Harmony. Supervisor Grell had workstation security for 15 years. He had dealt with smugglers, criminals, and one attempted invasion. Nothing had ever confused him like the reports flooding his office today. It was in the ventilation shaft. A Vichy technician said, her feathers trembling. I was running maintenance checks when I saw eyes. Glowing eyes. They stared at me for 3 seconds, and then they were gone. What kind of eyes? Grell asked, his antennae twitching. Small. Yellow-green. They did not blink. Grell made a note and dismissed her. She was the 7th person to report something similar in the last 6 hours. A Florian maintenance worker claimed something had knocked tools off his workbench when his back was turned. A Mallory cook swore she heard strange sounds from inside the walls. 2 Kravath guards reported seeing a shadow move against the direction of the light, which should have been impossible. Grell pulled up the security footage and watched it frame by frame. He saw corridors. He saw crew members walking past. And sometimes, just at the edge of the camera's view, he saw movement, a blur, a shape that was there one moment and gone the next. Whatever it was fast, faster than anything he had ever tracked. He was still studying the footage when Ambassador Dren stormed into his office. I demand answers, Dren said. His red eyes were bloodshot, and his movements were jerky. He looked like he had not slept. Something was in my quarters last night. Something was watching me. Grell's antennae rose in surprise. You saw it too? I saw eyes. Small, glowing eyes. When I tried to catch it, it disappeared. We have received many similar reports, Grell said carefully. We believe it may be the human's companion animal, the cat. Dren's voice dripped with disbelief. A small pet is causing this much disruption. It appears so. Dren slammed one of his 4 fists against Grell's desk, cracking the surface. Then find it. Capture it. This is ridiculous. After Dren left, Grell tried to do exactly that. He deployed sensors in every corridor. He stationed guards at ventilation access points. He even borrowed a thermal tracking device from the science department. Nothing worked. The cat moved like smoke through the station. It appeared in Section 7, and by the time security arrived, it was already in Section 12. It left no tracks, made no sound, and seemed to know exactly where every camera was pointed. In the station cafeteria, Annie Webb sat alone, eating a bowl of soup. Dren found her there, his 4 arms crossed, and his expression dark. Your creature is causing problems, he said. Annie looked up calmly. Mr. Whiskers? What has he done? He has been seen all over the station. He has frightened crew members. He was in my personal quarters. Was he? Annie took another spoonful of soup. He must like you. Like me? Dren leaned closer, his shadow falling over the table. He was watching me while I slept. That is not affection. That is predatory behavior. For a cat, those are the same thing, Annie said. If Mr. Whiskers is watching you, it means he finds you interesting. You should be flattered. Dren did not look flattered. He looked like he wanted to tear something apart with his bare hands. What exactly is a cat? He demanded. Your database entry says they are small, domesticated predators. But how can something so small cause this much trouble? Annie set down her spoon and considered the question. Cats are hunters. They evolved to catch small prey like rodents and birds. They are very good at it. How good? Better than most predators on Earth. They are patient. They are silent. They can see in almost complete darkness, and their hearing can detect sounds too quiet for humans to notice. Dren shifted his weight, processing this information. But they are small. My armor could withstand any attack from such a creature. Probably, Annie agreed. But cats do not attack like Kravith warriors. They do not charge and fight directly. They wait. They watch. They choose exactly the right moment. For what? Annie smiled. That depends on what they want. Dren stared at her for a long moment. Then he turned and walked away without another word. That night, the station's lower maintenance decks reported something strange. The pest creatures that lived in the walls and fed on garbage had been dying at an alarming rate. By morning, 47 small bodies had been found. Each one had been killed with a single precise bite to the neck. None of them had been eaten. Grell studied the bodies with growing unease. This was not hunting for food. This was hunting for sport. This was a predator practicing its skills. And somewhere in the shadows of Harmony, 7, two yellow-green eyes continued to watch. The research bay was quiet when Dren arrived. Only Dr. Silo, the station's Florian xenobiologist, was present. The plant-like scientist looked up from his work with mild surprise. Ambassador Dren, how may I help you? I need information, Dren said. His voice was lower than usual, almost cautious. About Earth predators, specifically about the creature called a cat. Silo's leafy appendages rustled with interest. Of course. Please sit. Dren did not sit. He stood with his 4 arms crossed while Silo pulled up the database entry on his display screen. Felis catus, Silo read aloud. The domestic cat. Average weight between 4 and 5 kilograms. Average length approximately 46 centimeters, not including the tail. Small, Dren said. Very small. Yes. Silo scrolled through the data. But the physical specifications become more interesting as we read further. Other crew members had drifted into the research bay, drawn by curiosity about what had been terrorizing the station. A group of Vichy huddled near the door. 2 Mallory engineers stood against the far wall. Even Supervisor Grell had arrived, his antennae twitching nervously. Silo continued reading. Cats possess retractable claws. Unlike most predators whose claws dull with use, cat claws stay sharp because they are hidden inside the paw until needed. Clever design, Grell muttered. Their spine contains more vertebrae than most mammals, allowing extreme flexibility. They can twist their bodies in midair and fit through any opening large enough for their skull. Dren thought about the ventilation grates throughout the station. Most were far too small for any species aboard. None of them were too small for a cat. Their eyes contain a reflective layer that amplifies available light, Silo continued. They can see clearly in conditions that would be total darkness for most species. Their ears can rotate independently and detect frequencies well beyond human hearing. Their whiskers are so sensitive they can detect changes in air pressure, allowing them to sense movement even without seeing or hearing it. The Vichy near the door made small distress sounds. One of them whispered, "It can sense us without seeing us?" Silo nodded slowly. Their paw pads have evolved specifically for silent movement. A hunting cat makes almost no sound at all. Combined with their patience, this makes them extremely effective ambush predators. What is their success rate? Dren asked. Silo checked the data, and his leaves went slightly pale. Domestic cats have a hunting success rate of approximately 32%. This may sound low, but for comparison, Earth lions succeed only 25% of the time. Cats are more successful hunters than most large apex predators. Silence filled the room. There is more, Silo said quietly. The psychological aspects are perhaps more concerning than the physical capabilities. Explain, Dren ordered. Cats do not hunt only for food. Even well-fed cats continue to hunt. It appears to be a compulsive behavior, something they cannot stop even if they want to. They hunt for the act of hunting itself. They kill for sport, Grell said, and his voice was barely a whisper. In a sense, they also engage in what researchers call play behavior with their prey. They will catch a creature, release it, catch it again, and repeat this process multiple times before the final kill. The Mallory engineers backed toward the exit. The Vichy had stopped making sounds entirely, frozen in place like their ancient prey ancestors. Dren forced himself to speak calmly. My armor is strong. Surely such small claws cannot harm me. That may be true, Silo agreed. But consider this. The psychological effect of being hunted does not require physical harm. The stress, the constant alertness, the inability to sleep peacefully. These things damage a creature even without a single scratch. Before anyone could respond, Annie Webb walked into the research bay. She was holding a cup of tea and looked completely relaxed. Oh, a lecture about cats, she said cheerfully. I hope Dr. Silo mentioned the most important part. What part? Dren asked. Annie sipped her tea. Cats were never domesticated by humans. Not really. Dogs were domesticated. Horses were domesticated. Cats simply decided that living near humans was convenient. They hunted the rodents attracted to our grain stores, and we provided shelter from larger predators. She paused, and her smile widened slightly. After 10,000 years, they still do not consider themselves owned by us. Every cat is a wild predator who chooses to tolerate human company. When they look at you, they're not looking at a master or a provider. They're looking at a useful ally who happens to be too large to eat. The room was completely silent. By the way, Annie added, Mr. Whiskers has been leaving gifts around the station. Little presents from his hunts. It means he likes us. In cat language, it means he is providing for his family. Dren said nothing. For once, the Kravith ambassador had no words at all. Dren had not slept in 3 days. Every night, the eyes appeared. Sometimes at the foot of his bed. Sometimes on top of the storage unit. Once, he woke to find them watching him from the ceiling ventilation grate directly above his face that he was done waiting. He was done being prey. We hunt today, he announced to his 4 Kravith guards. We find this creature, we capture it, and we prove once and for all that the Kravith fear nothing. The guards nodded, but Dren noticed something he had never seen before in their eyes. Uncertainty. They spread out through the station, using a coordinated search pattern that had helped them conquer 3-star systems. Dren took the lower maintenance decks. His guards covered the residential sections, the cargo bays, and the public areas. The hunt began at station morning. By midday, they had found nothing. Every time someone reported a sighting, Dren rushed to the location. Every time, the corridor was empty. The creature was always one step ahead, as if it knew their plans before they made them. Section 9. A guard reported over the communication link. I saw it enter a storage room. Dren sprinted through the corridors, his heavy feet thundering against the metal floor. He reached Section 9 in under 2 minutes. His guard was standing outside a closed door, weapon ready. It went in there, the guard said. There is no other exit. Dren smiled grimly. Finally, he punched the door control and charged inside. The room was filled with containers and equipment. Perfect hiding spots for a small creature. Dren and his guards searched every corner, every shadow, every space large enough to hide a cat. Nothing. I saw it enter, the guard insisted. I watched the door the entire time. Dren looked up at the ceiling. A small ventilation grate sat in the corner. It was barely wide enough for his arm to fit through. The cat had escaped through a gap he could never follow. By late afternoon, the other species on the station had begun to watch. Vichy gathered in small groups, whispering to each other. Mallory peeked around corners with amused expressions. Even in normally peaceful Florians seemed to be enjoying the spectacle. Dren realized with horror that he had become entertainment. There, one of his guards shouted. Corridor 7. Dren ran. His lungs burned. His muscles ached. He rounded the corner and finally saw it. The cat sat in the middle of the corridor, calmly licking its pee. It was smaller than Dren had expected. Gray and white fur covered its body. Its yellow-green eyes looked at him without fear, without concern, without any emotion at all. Dren charged. The cat watched him approach. At the last possible moment, just as Dren's hands were about to close around it, the creature stepped sideways. One smooth, unhurried step. It slipped through a gap between 2 pipes and vanished. Dren crashed into the wall. His armored shoulder left a dent in the metal. Behind him, he heard a soft sound. Was that laughter from the watching Vichy? He kept searching. Hours passed. The cat appeared and disappeared, always staying just out of reach. It walked through narrow spaces. It climbed surfaces that should have been impossible to grip. It moved through the station like it owned every corridor and room, because Drin slowly realized it did. To the cat, this entire station was its territory. Every hiding spot was mapped. Every escape route was memorized. The Kravith were not hunting the cat. The cat was allowing itself to be seen whenever it chose. That be why the 18th hour, Drin's guards were broken. They jumped at shadows. They snapped at each other over small mistakes. One of them refused to enter a dark room without backup. These were warriors who had conquered worlds. Now they were afraid to walk alone. Drin finally gave up. He dragged himself back to his quarters, muscles aching, pride shattered. He wanted nothing more than to collapse on his sleeping platform and forget this nightmare day. He opened his door and stopped Adamar. Whiskers sat on his sleeping platform, calmly grooming himself. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The cat looked up at Drin with those yellow-green eyes. Then it yawned, showing every single one of its small, sharp teeth. Drin lunged. The cat stood and stretched, taking its time. Then it walked across the platform, jumped to the floor, and strolled toward a small gap between the wall and a storage unit that IT looked back once, as if making sure Drin was watching. Then it squeezed through the gap and disappeared. Drin stood alone in his quarters, breathing heavily. He had conquered worlds. He had killed creatures 10 times his size. He had faced death countless times without flinching. And he had just been defeated by an animal that weighed less than his arm. Annie was reading in her quarters when the door chimed. She looked up surprised. It was late in the station's night cycle, not a normal time for visitors. "Come in," she said. The door opened, and Ambassador Drin stepped inside. He looked different than before. His posture was hunched. His red eyes were tired. The arrogance that had defined him since his arrival was completely gone. "Dr. Webb," he said quietly, "may I speak with you?" Annie set down her book and gestured to a chair. "Of course." Drin sat. The chair creaked under his weight, but it held. For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stared at the floor like a warrior who had lost his first battle. "Why?" he finally asked. "Why what? Why do you keep such a creature?" He looked up at her with genuine confusion. "It is dangerous. It is unpredictable. It humiliated me and my guards for an entire day. Why would any species choose to live with something like that?" Before Annie could answer, a soft sound came from the corner of the room. Both of them turned to look. Mr. Whiskers emerged from behind a plant pot. He stretched his front legs, arching his back in a graceful curve. Then he walked across the room toward Annie, his tail held high. Drin tensed, expecting the creature to disappear again. Instead, Mr. Whiskers jumped onto Annie's lap. He circled twice, then curled into a ball and began to purr. Drin stared. The sound was like nothing he had ever heard. It was soft and rhythmic, almost hypnotic. The creature that had terrorized an entire station was now pressing its head against Annie's hand, demanding attention. "I do not understand," Drin admitted. Annie stroked Mr. Whiskers gently. "What you see now is not a different cat. This is the same creature that has been watching you, hunting the pests, and disappearing into shadows. The difference is not in him. The difference is in how he sees me." "How does he see you?" "As family." Annie smiled. "Cats are territorial. They choose who belongs in their territory and who does not. To Mr. Whiskers, I am part of his home. He protects me. He brings me gifts. He sleeps near me because he trusts me. And everyone else is either a potential threat or potential prey, until proven otherwise." Drin processed this slowly. So when he was watching me, he was not hunting me. He was evaluating me. Exactly. He was deciding whether you were dangerous to his territory and his family. Annie paused. "The fact that he never actually attacked you means he decided you were not a real threat. Just someone who needed to be watched carefully." "I was being supervised," Drin said, and there was no pride in his voice. "By a creature I could crush with one hand. Size does not matter to cats. They evaluate everything the same way. Lions, mice, Kravith ambassadors. All potential threats or prey until proven safe." Drin watched the cat purring in her lap. Such a small creature. Such complete confidence. How do I prove I am safe? He asked quietly. Annie looked at him with surprise. This was not a question she had expected from a Kravith warrior. There is a way, she said. Cats communicate with their eyes. A direct stare is a challenge, but a slow blink means trust. It means no threat. A slow blink, like this. Annie looked at Mr. Whiskers and slowly closed her eyes, then opened them. The cat looked up at her and did the same, his yellow-green eyes closing and opening in a lazy, deliberate motion. They only do that for creatures they trust completely, Annie explained. Dren hesitated. This felt strange. This felt vulnerable. But he had asked the question, and he wanted the answer that he looked at Mr. Whiskers. The cat stared back at him with those unblinking eyes. Dren took a breath and slowly closed his own eyes, then opened them. For a long moment, the cat just watched him. Dren felt ridiculous. He was an ambassador of a conquering species, trying to communicate with a small furry predator through eye movements. Then Mr. Whiskers blinked. Slow and deliberate. Dren felt something shift in his chest. He did not have a word for the emotion. You trust me? Dren asked, and his voice was almost hopeful. Not completely. Not yet. But that was a start. Annie smiled. Trust is earned slowly, even among cats. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. The purring filled the room like distant music. Dr. Webb, Dren finally said, are cats the most dangerous companions humans keep? Annie laughed softly. Not even close. You should see our dogs. They hunt in packs, follow commands perfectly, and would die to protect their families. And do not even get me started on horses. Dren looked at her with something that might have been fear. Annie just smiled and continued petting Mr. Whiskers. 1 month had passed since the cat incident, as the station crew now called it. The diplomatic chamber was full again. All 12 species had gathered, just as they had on that first day. But the atmosphere was completely different now. Ambassador Dren stood at the center of the room. He was still 8 feet tall. His armor still gleamed like volcanic glass. His red eyes still swept across the gathered delegates. But his voice was different, softer, thoughtful. I spoke to you once about fear, Dren began. I told you the Kravith fear nothing. I told you we were the apex predators of the galaxy. He paused, and a small smile crossed his face. I was wrong. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A Kravith admitting error was something none of them had ever witnessed. The Kravith have always believed that strength means destroying everything that threatens us. We conquered worlds. We hunted predators to extinction. We eliminated anything we could not control. Dren shook his head slowly. But we missed something important, something the humans understood long ago. He turned to look at the human delegation. Annie sat in her usual place, calm and composed. Beside her, on a special perch that had been installed after much debate, sat Mr. Whiskers. The cat was grooming himself with complete disinterest in the diplomatic proceedings. Humans did not conquer their predators, Dren continued. They formed alliances with them. They found creatures that could kill them, and instead of destroying those creatures, they earned their trust. They built partnerships that made both species stronger. He looked at Mr. Whiskers directly. The cat paused his grooming and stared back. Dren slowly blinked. Mr. Whiskers slowly blinked in return. Several delegates gasped. Word of the slow blink had spread across the station. Everyone knew what it meant. The Kravith have conquered many worlds, Dren said, but we have never made a single ally. We have never earned trust from another species. We have never been chosen as partners. He straightened his posture, and for the first time since arriving on the station, he looked truly proud. That changes today. The Kravith formally request an alliance with humanity. Not because humans are weak and need our protection, but because humans understand something we're only beginning to learn. True strength is not about what you can destroy. It is about what you can build together. The chamber erupted in excited chatter. Counselor Prim had to call for order several times before the room quieted. Annie stood and walked to the center of the room. She extended her hand to Dren. The Kravith looked at the small human hand, then carefully took it with one of his 4 massive ones. They shook, and history was made. After the formal session ended, delegates crowded around the human section. Everyone wanted to see the cat. Everyone wanted to understand the creature that had humbled the Cravath.mr. Whiskers tolerated the attention with the patience of a king accepting tribute from lesser beings. He allowed some aliens to approach closely. Others, he warned away with a flat-eared stare that sent them backing up immediately. Dren approached last. The other delegates made room for him, still not entirely comfortable in his presence. "Mr. Whiskers," Dren said formally, "I hope we can continue to build trust." The cat looked at him for a long moment. Then he stood, stretched, and walked across the perch until he was close to Dren's arm. He did not jump onto the arm. He did not curl up and purr. That would come later, maybe if trust continued to grow. But he sat near Dren, close enough to touch if Dren chose to reach out. It was an invitation, a possibility. Dren did not reach out. He understood now. Trust was earned slowly. That night, Dren returned to his quarters. He prepared for sleep, still amazed at how peaceful his nights had become. No more watching eyes. No more sleepless hours. As he settled onto his sleeping platform, he heard a soft thump from the floor.mr. Whiskers had entered through a gap that Dren had deliberately left uncovered. The cat jumped onto a shelf near the bed and curled into a ball that he was not on the bed. He was not touching Dren, but he was in the room, choosing to sleep nearby. Dren smiled in the darkness. The Kravith had conquered worlds through strength. They had crushed enemies and claimed territories across the stars. But this small creature had taught him something his entire species had missed. The humans had conquered something far more impressive than planets. They had convinced apex predators to become family. Mr. Whiskers began to purr, filling the room with that strange, peaceful sound. Dren closed his eyes and slept better than he had in years. Perhaps, he thought, the Kravitz still had much to learn. And perhaps that was not such a bad thing after all.